It's time to build the ultimate gaming PC build featuring the world's fastest GPU, the RTX 4090, the world's fastest gaming CPU, the i9-13900K, and wait for it, a $1,200 MSI Godlike motherboard. Are all of these components terribly overpriced and bad value for money? Or actually, do some of these parts warrant their hefty price tags? Let's find out. The Corsair iQ5000T provides the ultimate in airflow, RGB lighting and mounting compatibility for PC builds in 2022. With 3 alloy fans included, 160 addressable RGB lights in the front, roof and floor panels, Corsair have really taken things up a notch. Learn more about the awesome 5000T in our build videos over on the channel or at the where to buy links in the description below. Let's start things off a little bit differently and take a look at all of the components that make this build possible, and then go ahead and put this behemoth together. Now this right here can be none other than MSI's Suprim Liquid 4090. If I open up what might just be the world's largest GPU box, you'll see that the form factor of this card isn't actually all that massive. But someone basically came along and strapped an all-in-one liquid cooler to a 4090, and to be honest with you, I'm absolutely here for it. Temperatures are a lot lower. Is it a bit overkill? Yes, but isn't that what the 4090 is just all about? The i9-13900K, the CPU choice in my build today, is a similar story. 24 cores, 32 threads. They're not all full-fat cores, so some of them are performance, some of them are efficiency cores, but it's still a beast nevertheless. And a TDP that breaks the boundaries of 12th gen, and this thing is impressive, but does need a bit more cooling. You can see just from the graphs on screen now, this CPU just absolutely rocks. Put it through any application, whether it's a synthetic benchmark, your Firestrike, Cinebench, whether you're playing games like Formula 1 2022, Battlefield 2042, this thing absolutely smashes it. Awesome for like video rendering too. You've got Intel QuickSync. I mean, it just ticks so many boxes at a time where AMD's Ryzen 7000 is a bit of a tricky sell if I'm being completely honest. Of course, using a new Intel 13th gen opens the door up for this as well, the MSI Z790 Godlike. Now, this is the most expensive motherboard I think I've ever seen. However, it is absolutely crammed with features that should, in theory, make it awesome for a build like this. Looking around the board, you've got a 28-phase VRM power delivery system with plenty of cooling. You've got loads of M.2 SSD slots. Let me try and remember them all. So there's 2 Gen 4s under here, a Gen 4 here, 2 more Gen 4s here, a Gen 5 on the bottom left, and a Gen 3 on the bottom right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 M.2 slots. I mean, if you put like a 4 terabyte Samsung 990 Pro in 7 slots, 28 terabytes of potential SSD storage, and obviously if drives get even bigger, you can pop those in. LGA 1700 socket, that's obviously very important. You've got a very strong rear I/O on this board, so loads of USB-Cs, Thunderbolt 4, 2.5 and 10 gigabit dual Ethernet, so 12.5 gigabits of Ethernet bandwidth on this board. That's a bit bonkers. Obviously, this board's going to give you widespread PCIe Gen 5 and all those sort of features too for upcoming future graphics cards. And there's so many peels on this board, it's going to look extra fresh once they've all been taken off, or at least that's the idea. While I'm here, I might as well go ahead and just pop in the CPU, the RAM and the SSD. Just taking a look at the SSD and the RAM. I've got a Corsair Vengeance RGB DDR5 kit. This is 32 gigs, but I might pick up a second kit for 64. Kind of makes sense for the vibe we're going for. And the Samsung 990 Pro. This is their brand new fastest Gen 4 NVMe drive. You can read a full review over on the website. 2 terabytes in capacity. Going to do the job nicely. And of course, with 6 M.2 slots remaining after the installation of the 990 Pro, you've got plenty of room for upgrades if you decide actually you'd like a bit more M.2 storage every year for the next 7 years. That's how crazy this board is. CPU goes into the socket, RAM clicks into the DIMMs, and the SSD, of course, is going to go in the very top slot, just above the first PCIe X16 lane. Very cool observation, but this M.2 heat shield is, or at least it was a minute ago, and I demonstrated it off camera. Ow, magnetic. So you haven't got to use a screw to unscrew it, which is a bit fiddly, but I mean, it seems to work. We can then remove this sort of cover, another peel. Aha, there we go. Hey. Do the same on the underside, and then, in theory, put it back how it was. Like that. Okay, fair play MSI, that's actually a pretty cool, innovative solution that I've not seen on any of the boards, as long as it doesn't fall off, but I mean, seems pretty solid to me. Now seems like a pretty good time to take a look at the cooler and the power supply, as they're two components you should start thinking about at this stage of the build. Now the PSU is the MSI Ai1300P. This is a smart power supply so we can monitor our power usage in Windows and stuff. 1300 watts might seem overkill, but with the CPU able to exceed 300 with a decent overclock, our 4090 graphics card using what, 550 watts in total, you can see already how this build can swallow up 850 watts like that. If energy bills are something you're worried about, then maybe a 4090 PC is not for you. But to be honest with you, anyone spending the money on a 4090 must be pretty crackers anyway. It's also got braided cables, this unit too, making your build process a bit easier and making everything look a little bit nicer. But the cooler is an item I wanted to touch on because starting its installation now is going to make everything else a bit easier later. This is the H150i Elite LCD from Corsair. Based on their legendary H100i platform, the 50 extra just means we've got a 360mm rather than a 240mm radiator. So 3 fans rather than 2. It's got a screen on it so we can monitor like our liquid temperatures and all of that jazz, and it's going to fit in aesthetically and performance-wise with exactly what I'm after for this system. One thing that also sells Corsair coolers for me is their IQ software. Whenever anyone says anything's got a screen on it, I'm a little bit skeptical because is that actually very easy to control? If not, it's not really any point. IQ's fantastic though and gives us loads of information that we can actually do something with and that is actually quite useful. Inside the cooler's box you'll find one of these. This is a backplate. Now the backplate is going to basically secure the cooler to the motherboard, and you'll see how it does that in a moment. You'll also find the cooler itself, but we don't actually need to worry about the main part just yet. The included ML RGB fans, and these male-to-male posts and thumb screws. Now, this is where the motherboard actually comes back into play, because we're actually going to go ahead and slide the backplate onto the rear of the motherboard and use these aforementioned male-to-male posts to secure not only the backplate into place, but also provide the mounting basis for the cooler a little bit later. With that basic prep done, I think we're about as far with the motherboard ahead as we possibly can be. And I've covered off all of the components bar one, which is pretty handy actually, because the case, that particular component, is what we need to actually get the next phase of the build rolling on. Now, I've picked up the HAF 700 Evo. I'm not going to physically pick it up and show you all the features. We'll use cheat B-roll footage instead, as this thing is so incredibly heavy. I recently featured this case's little brother, the HAF 700 non-Evo, but I prefer this one, as it's got RGB glass panes on the front, a customizable screen which, while the software's not quite as good, we can just set it to one thing and leave it at that. You get heaps of RGB, loads of fan mounting space. This thing is just absolutely awesome on so many levels. Is it a bit overkill? Yes, but isn't that the whole point of today's video? Oh, guys, the box of screws. Oh, wow. It's split in the box. Listen to this. Oh, no. No, this is... No, oh, no. This is so bad. There's more. Oh, no.
A few moments later.
Installing a motherboard like this is always such a kind of a nerve-wracking process. It's so heavy. Trying to find good grip points where you can firmly hold the board but also not break or scratch anything can be a challenge. Especially when, for whatever reason, it just doesn't want to line up. That is not aligned at all. Progress update. It's definitely something to do with the PCI lanes, which I've removed, that was causing the problem. I've now got 3 screws in at the top, and it seems... I mean, it's not going anywhere. I've managed to get 2 in along the middle row and 2 down the bottom, but these 2 on the end here, I just can't get in. Now, obviously when the graphics card's in, that'll help apply some downward pressure, and to be completely frank with you all, this thing ain't going anywhere anytime soon. So I'm going to pop back on the removable M.2 heatsink we took off earlier. The reason you need to take that off is to get at one of the motherboard screws, which has now been screwed in. So, this system is kind of winning me over, bit by bit, and I've realised there's a button for actually releasing it. You haven't got to just yank it really hard. In fact, you probably shouldn't yank it really hard. Anyway, that's all in. I'm going to pop the radiator in this void up here. Push-pull config makes the most sense, so I'm going to dig out 3 extra non-RGB fans. They won't be seen at the top, and then I'll walk you through how I'm going to install the CPU water block shortly afterwards. But provisionally, that's all in and looking good. A drop of thermal paste onto the CPU is going to do nicely, create that good thermal bond. Then the cooler head can go on top of the processor, a little something like this. We're going to add thumb screws in each corner. Just go for the corners that are easiest to add on first of all. The cooler's not going to sit flat until fully tightened, which might make screwing in some corners just a bit more tricky. Then you grab your screwdriver and you tighten them up as much as you possibly can. Don't tighten each one up all the way individually, just go around and tighten them up bit by bit so that the cooler starts to sit more flat. If you've not quite got it right and you can't now move it because it's tight, you can just loosen it and retighten later without taking all the thermal paste off or anything like that. Of course, this cooler has a screen, a module which you can toollessly put on and take off. It literally is like that. It's just magnetic, no screws involved, and we'll run all of those cables out of the way and deal with them later. The next component on my proverbial hit list is, of course, the installation of the graphics card. Now, the Suprim 4090, as I touched on... Oh, taking a look at the build, I think it only makes sense to have the radiator actually go at the front of the chassis. That's if, of course, the tubes will reach, something I'm becoming increasingly doubtful of. Okay, so they do actually reach after a quick check. It might be a little bit of a squeeze, but I think we should be okay. I've still left the PCI lanes off at the rear, but I think I'm going to add those back in now when I install the GPU. This Cooler Master case actually has a toolless system where you just pull this back, slide the card in, and close it nice and easy. Let's put the graphics card in first. Here we are. It's in. Here we go. Oh, nice. For all of the right reasons, that was very anticlimactic. But it is in, and that's all that really matters. I've decided it's going to go at the front, definitely. We'll save the bottom for some extra intake fans, which I will add in afterwards. For now, though, I just need to remove this like a bracket at the front here and use this to secure the radiator into place. Although the fans are going to have to be swapped, which is a right pain in the ass. This bracket that Cooler Master installed is good, but it's such like a mind-bending, confusing contraption. So in theory... yes, that is exactly what we need to do. So we've got to get somehow the radiator on the backside. The fans have got to screw through. Oh, it's just a mess. It's a mess, honestly. Right, after many a trial and many a tribulation, I think we should be good. We're back in business, baby. Oh, yes. Now that appears, at least this time round, to actually be working. Everything seems, so far, to be fitting all good. Couple of things I do want to do, though, before adding the power supply in. Tidy up the cables is one, but also take off the bottom fan mount. More laborious fan installations to pop in a couple more Sickle Flow Cooler Master fans, just to make it look a bit more full. Looks a bit empty and lonely down there right now. And there we finally have it. Time to add in the PSU. I think I might have touched on this earlier. Can't remember. If I did, here it is again. If not, here is MSI's Ai1300P. Great power supply. We've done a full review over on the website. Please go and give it a read. The website is on fire at the moment. People are loving the content we're putting out. PC builds, reviews, hardware guides, top cases, top motherboards, you name it. Anything PC hardware related, GeekaWhat.com has you covered. The most shameless of plugs. Check it out. Links below. Links in the cards. It's awesome. Now this unit comes with included braided cables, as I alluded to previously, and this really nice black and gold aesthetic. You can actually, I'm not really sure why, you can take off the gold bits as opposed to replace them with different coloured bits, of which none are included, or maybe it's just about making it all black. You want something a bit more neutral. This power supply has got you covered, and it does so on both sides. You've got that modularity all over the unit. Slide the power supply into place, and then use these two captive thumb screws to actually secure it down. That's right, Cooler Master have installed a toolless power supply installation method. Very, very clever. Then we can spin the case around again. It gets tiring when the case is... oh my god, this heavy. So the CPU one obviously plugs up to the top, the motherboard to the right hand side with an auxiliary 6-pin GPU power connector, and then our beefy up to 600 watt PCIe 5 connector. Yep, the ones that have sort of been catching fire, but this one should be okay, goes into the Suprim side of the GPU, and we can pull through all of the cable. To be clear, it's the adapter specifically that's having some of the problems, rather than these dedicated GPU power cables. And with that, the whole PC, apart from a few front panel cables, is finished. I'm so excited. It's took 3 hours to build this thing. It's so complicated. But we're going to go ahead and boot it up, see if it all works for the first time, after, of course, adding all the side panels on and dealing with the cable management. Keep your fingers crossed for me, ladies and gents.
2 days later.
After a couple more hours, wow, 2 days, but we'll gloss over that. It's ready. Let's hit the power button on the motherboard and see if anything's going to work. Maybe I didn't press it properly. Or maybe I did and it's broken. Let me just try turning off the switch on the power supply. Turn that back on. Then hit the power. Oh, there we go. Wait, I image of me on the back. The bottom, the RAM's red, which is the wrong colour, but hopefully a trip to Windows should sort that out. The front also looks like it's working. The screen on there we haven't programmed yet. We can do that at another point. We've even got the liquid temperature of the H150i Elite LCD, which is amazing. Will it jump into Windows though? Yes, it will. Our 990 Pro have already installed Windows on before for a previous build, which should in theory make our lives a little bit easier. Here we go. Windows 11. Beautiful. Let's pop in my password, hit enter, very secure, 4 digits, and then we are in. Let's see how this thing performs and load up a couple of my favourite titles. First game that I want to test out is the latest COD Modern Warfare 2. I've been playing the campaign and I am nearly finished, but I'm on that final mission. It's very hard. Anyway, graphics on this one, we're running at full screen on our MSI 4K quantum dot monitor. The refresh rate of the display is 144 Hz, but of course we'll be surpassing that in frame rate, and 4K is the resolution. NVIDIA DLSS has been enabled on balanced mode, and everything else is basically on high and ultra. If I record our screen using NVIDIA Shadow Play, you guys can see exactly what I'm seeing on this beautiful panel, and we can run the benchmark mode to see what sort of frame rates are achievable. We've done 3 separate performance guides for Modern Warfare 2 for 1080, 1440 and 4K over on our website, detailing the best settings for a huge range of GPUs. But for now, all we care about is this 4090 in our HAF 700 Evo build. What is the frame rate and the performance going to be like? To be honest with you, I'm hoping for 150 FPS or above. 170 so far, that's a pretty good start, but let's see as the benchmark intensifies whether that level actually holds up or not. Interestingly enough, the frame rate's actually gone up now, about 200 frames per second, 211, so the frame rate's actually continuing to rise, believe it or not. And so far, visually, the game looks amazing. DLSS here working its magic, allowing, of course, 4K to be even more playable than it would have otherwise been. Frame rate solid, systems performing well, our water-cooled 4090 not letting us down just yet. In areas of high action, the frame rate obviously does drop a bit, but a lot of the time we're over 200 FPS on average, which is mightily impressive. Aha! Here is the summary. So apparently, we've got 210 frames per second on average, with 5th and 1st percentile lows of 167 and 143. The bottleneck, mainly our GPU, believe it or not, but that's obviously a testament to just how powerful the 13900K CPU is. The next title I want to try is a bit of F1 2022, the most popular sim racing game out right now. Can we get those similar level frame rates? Let's take a look. If one thing's for sure, we're not going to miss out on what frame rate we're achieving in F1 2022. My goodness. The culprit is running at 720p. None of that round here. Let's see if we can apply those changes. 4K for me only. Well, hey, that worked. That was actually surprisingly simple. And then we can set the ray tracing quality to high. Let's just set the preset in general, shall we, to ultra high. Let's push the boat out. If the 4090 can't do it, then frankly, no graphics card can. I'm pretty happy with all of those settings. And here we go. So the thing I'm most bothered about here is hitting 60 FPS or above. It's a racing game. 200's frankly not very useful, and it to look obviously as good as possible. And so far, I don't want to speak too prematurely, but this is one of the best looking, most realistic racing games I have ever seen. The graphics, I can't even begin to explain how good this game looks. 82, 83 frames per second. It feels incredibly smooth as well, which is always a great bonus. Can we take a cheeky dive down the inside? It's very late. Oh, we've made it stick. He's made it stick, ladies and gents. 78 frames per second. 80 FPS, very solid. Of course, if you wanted more frames, you could knock the ray tracing settings down, use the high rather than the ultra preset, and that'd shoot you about 120 frames a second, give or take, based on some of our detailed testing. You can, of course, see full benchmarks in this game over on GeekaWhat.com. So Formula 1 2022 then, stacking up very well, looks stunning. Same with Modern Warfare 2 Remastered. But what about the likes of Apex Legends and Fortnite? Well, let's take a look at some of the other games I've tested on this system. In Fortnite, at 1080p competitive settings, I pulled an impressive 333 frames per second, all the threes on average. This was with everything tuned down to low except the render distance, which we set to far for maximum frame rate. In COD Warzone, it was a similarly positive performance. With 4K high DLSS, we pulled in 223 frames per second. COD Warzone performing very well, looking fantastic. And at 4K high, with that DLSS enabled, I was pretty astounded to receive such high frame rates. Apex Legends also performed well. This is a game that has a hard cap of 300 FPS, so 232, while still 70 FPS away, wasn't a million miles off, delivering pretty much top-end Apex performance. The game looked fantastic, and the 90 and 99 percentiles were consistent too. This is a system that really means business when it comes to performance, and you're sure not to be disappointed when building such an expensive rig to find these great frame rates. Make sure to get subscribed to the channel to see more from us. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.